Okay, so I just left a wedding for about 45 minutes so I can get a real money fantasy football draft going for y'all tonight. Sadly, I've not had a chance to watch any of the football games today, but I've heard through the grapevine that George Pickens is a goddamn man. So here we are maybe going to learn trial by fire. We're going to see how these fantasy football draft values are changing after week 1 of the preseason. We are going to be picking at 12. Yes, this is actually a real money fantasy football draft, of course. And we do this every single night. Usually 3 or 4 hour live streams, but sadly I have to go back to that wedding right after this draft. So this is just going to be a one draft stream, but hell, in the future, if you want to get in a draft with us, of course, go down there, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscribe button. That way, you know, when we're live, you can come out here, you can draft. And if you want to draft with us, make sure you go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. That's where we're drafting every single night, as you're going to see on this live stream. And when you go and sign up for Underdog Fantasy with the link in the description or the link in the comment section, you will get a 100% deposit match up to $100. Look at our 2022 fantasy football rankings and our 2022 fantasy football draft guide. So make sure you're taking advantage of that. And here, it's going to be hard for us to take advantage of any falling values because at this point, oh my gosh, people in these drafts are so good, especially this is just people a part of the flock, just people a part of this live stream, and they are going to be coming out here and crushing us because they've had so much practice in these drafts every single night. So hopefully we can manage. Hopefully we can find some value at 12. If I had to guess what we are getting at 12, my guess is going to be Najee Harris, Travis Kelce. That's my guess. Benny already coming out here talking about George Pickens. Please let me know in the live chat. Let me know in the comment section. What has been your biggest takeaway from week 1 of the preseason? Is it that George Pickens is as advertised? Is that the biggest takeaway this preseason? At least week 1? I mean, obviously Pickens had so much hype coming out of training camp, and he was a polarizing prospect where a lot of people said George Pickens is either going to be a massive bust or George Pickens is going to be an elite level wide receiver. There weren't really many people coming out saying, oh, George Pickens is going to be pretty good. No, it was either one or another when people were going out there talking about Pickens. So if he's already crushing, hell, he has the pedigree. He was a 5-star prospect going to Georgia, broke out at 18 years old. So there are a lot of things to get excited about. Cope says Trey Lance equals Jesus. My man, you know I want to bet on our guy Trey Lance. Of course, it's nice to see Lance out there scoring touchdowns as well. Evan says Antonio Gibson bust. Okay, let me know in the live chat. I did look into the game log. Like I said, I have not had a chance. I've been at a wedding all day. I'm probably still supposed to be there, but I wanted to get y'all this live stream. I am going to look in to what happened with Antonio Gibson versus Brian Robinson. I'm just box score scouting right now, and that's the worst thing. I repeat, the worst thing you could do in the preseason is go out there and box score scout. If anything, you're probably going to be hurting yourself in fantasy football. But I did notice that Brian Robinson had a decent workload today. At least I believe I checked in after the first or second quarter. Let me know what your assessment of the Washington situation was there with Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson. Benny says he fumbled twice today. You're kidding me. Antonio Gibson fumbled twice today? Guys, Antonio Gibson led the NFL in fumbles last year. That was one of our concerns with one of our red flags that we had and why they maybe brought in Brian Robinson in the third. If Antonio Gibson actually fumbled twice today, which I'm looking this up right now, this is not a great sign for Antonio Gibson. And I would actually say that is probably something that would make him fall down draft boards. Like, I'll be a lot less excited to draft Antonio Gibson at the 7-8 turn here if that actually did happen. Okay, yeah, so Antonio Gibson fumbled on the second carry today. Ron Rivera said Antonio Gibson is going to run hard. Oh, this is brutal, guys. That was one of the worries that you had and why they potentially drafted Brian Robinson in the 3rd round. Of course, them bringing J.D. McKissic back has nothing to do with the Antonio Gibson fumbles, but the Brian Robinson investment definitely does. Oh, dear God. Self-Made Fantasy says George Pickens is Randy Moss 2.0. Oh, dear God. Okay, but going back into this draft, you have Nick Chubb falling to pick 27, Deebo Samuel pick 22. This is one of the most exciting starts I think you could have at this point of the offseason. Justin Jefferson, Deebo Samuel, and Nick Chubb through the first 3 rounds. That is so damn exciting. And I know some people may wonder, Mason, you have Joe Mixon ranked in the middle of the first round in your 2022 fantasy football draft guide, in your 2022 fantasy football rankings. Why are you taking CeeDee Lamb ahead of him? On Underdog, guys, you have to start 3 wide receivers. And because you have to start 3 wide receivers, these guys are naturally going to get pushed up draft boards. So I still stand by our Joe Mixon ranking, our running back rankings being ahead of guys like CeeDee Lamb. When you're playing in a league where you only start 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, and 2 flex spots. There, I think you are incentivized to go and grab that elite level running back, especially if it's a casual format. But in this format in particular, because you have to start 3 wide receivers and have 1 flex, that is going to lead itself to just pushing wide receivers up in the middle rounds where we can end up getting someone like Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the 8th. So that's our reasoning in taking CeeDee Lamb here over Joe Mixon, despite y'all know I am Joe Mixon's biggest fanboy. So now we have DJ Moore going off the board 33. So Josh Allen falling a considerable amount here. I have noticed this more and more. Josh Allen was a player that really never made it outside of the very beginning of the 3rd round earlier this offseason, but you are seeing this slip for Josh Allen. And I think it makes sense if you're looking at the value that you're getting with other quarterbacks with the Mahomes as well as with Lamar Jackson in the 5th round. Now, Mikey's Lattery on the clock. They went running back through the first 2 with the combination of Najee Harris, Saquon Barkley. Wonder if they're going to give us Allen or Jalen Waddle. Like, who do they give us here? I'm taking definitely one of these players. Beyond that, I don't want to give out my 3rd guy exactly. One of these guys I would take if they fall to us. If they both fall, we'll take both of them. Mikey's goes Josh Allen. So we're going to take Jalen Waddle, and we're also going to take James Conner. I mean, with James Conner here, yes, I'll admit this is a running back that you have had to deal with injuries in years past. And with James Conner, the touchdown regression's probably going to hit him in a big-time way in Arizona this upcoming season. He's not going to continue to score more than a touchdown a game. No, Kyler Murray will start vulturing those touchdowns at the goal line. But still, this is a completely fine price point. Kobe Short says, what % of Antonio Gibson do you have? I'm not going to lie to y'all. I think I have a decent amount. Like, Antonio Gibson's been a running back going in the 8th round. So let me go through. Let me pull up my exact investment into Antonio Gibson. I'm going to give you our investment into him from a percentage basis, as well as what I'm really interested in is our entry fees. I have 9% Antonio Gibson. So we are slightly ahead. Not really. I mean, we're pretty much right in market with Antonio Gibson. And if we filter out by entry fees, okay, I guess we've gotten very lucky. I've gotten very lucky. It looks like the majority of drafts we've taken Antonio Gibson have been the cheaper drafts, have been the $5 drafts, maybe the $3 drafts. Of course, that has nothing to do with me not liking Gibson. It's just naturally where he falls to us and where we are interested in with a different roster constructions. But we got very lucky in that right, if that's going to be the case. Okay. Now we have Justin Herbert pick 40, Terry McLaurin 39. I'm interested to see where Antonio Gibson goes in this draft. And not only Antonio Gibson, but if George Pickens is as good as advertised, where are we going to get Deontay Johnson? And where are we going to get Chase Claypool? I think given what we've seen from Deontay Johnson the past few years in his target share, as well as the contract he just got, I think that Deontay's probably safe. Like, he's going to be on the field every single down regardless. He's going to be a target monster regardless. But Claypool should be seeing a significant hit. I went through and I tweeted out a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago at this point. And people got mad at me for saying this, of course. Yeah, I tweeted on, a little over a week ago, there's a real chance George Pickens is the wide receiver 2 over Chase Claypool. I'm going to tweet this. 99% chance, question mark. Now, we have Deontay Johnson going off the board here, pick 46. I'm going to take Deontay here. I think despite the very encouraging signs that you have from George Pickens, Deontay Johnson's still the wide receiver 1. Deontay Johnson's still going to be that target hog. I mean, he was the wide receiver 7 on a per game basis last year. I think you possibly have a quarterback upgrade in Pittsburgh. So for all the reasons I love Deontay Johnson, I'm not going to stop drafting him. Please don't be worried about that. Henry says he got Leonard Fournette at the 309 in an underdog draft earlier today. Oh, that is crazy, my friend. That is crazy. And now Mahomes goes 49. Lamar 47. Interesting to see that all the other quarterbacks go before their ADP, despite Josh Allen making it to almost the very end of the third round, the beginning of the fourth there at pick 35. Jordan says, got Hawkinson and Tony Pollard at 84 and 85 in a PPR format. What are your thoughts? I like it. I mean, with Hawkinson, a lot of people are going to be off of him because we haven't seen the efficiency over the past few years that you want to see from those early career tight ends, like what we got from Mark Andrews early on in Baltimore. But it has been one of the worst offensive situations. And he has back-to-back finishes of the tight end 6 on a points per game basis. And hell, he's drafted in 2019. Still incredibly young. Incredibly young. Okay. Now we have Darren Waller, George Kittle going back-to-back here, 50 and 51. I have seen this more and more. I have seen people deciding to take Kittle over Darren Waller. Is that something that y'all are doing? Like, is there a real argument to go ahead and to take George Kittle over Darren Waller? Y'all know, trust me, if I was ranking players from a real-life talent perspective in the NFL, I think from a raw talent perspective, if you're looking at the efficiency of George Kittle, how he moves Vegas lines, win games, I mean, when he is ruled out of a game versus when he does play a game, I think that there are not many non-quarterbacks that have the same impact on the game that George Kittle does. If we're talking raw NFL talent, I think Kittle's probably one of, if not the most talented tight end. Like, I love George Kittle, guys. From what he can do as a blocker to what he can do from a yards per run standpoint, I think Kittle is an elite level talent. But if we're looking at the overall passing volume that you're going to have in San Francisco, as well as the weapons that you have with the combination of Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, I feel like from a fantasy football perspective, if we're just chasing volume, maybe we end up needing to go with the Darren Waller there at pick 51. But we have some wide receivers going off in the middle of the fifth into the fifth round here. Gabriel Davis falls very far. Usually Gabriel Davis is a pick going at the beginning of the fourth round. Here he falls to pick 57. Now, what was the report on Brandon Cooks? It's something happened with Cooks today. Not likely to, yeah, of course he's not playing. Darnell Mooney catches one pass. I don't think that really has an impact. It's just double checking to make sure he didn't get hurt. I guess we go ahead. We take Kyler Murray. I want to grab an elite level quarterback at this point. I mean, with Kyler Murray, he does have it in his range of outcomes to be the quarterback one overall in fantasy based on the pace of play and the passing rate over expectation that you're going to have in Arizona. What else are we looking for? I said we go Rashad Bateman here. Let's move this down real quick. Now, Darnell Mooney goes 62. Going back to what we were discussing earlier, if it was a different format, like I'm not in love with Rashad Bateman here. I think on the whole, Rashad Bateman is an overvalued wide receiver in fantasy. I mean, this is someone that we're looking at with a 1.3 yards per route run his rookie season, a low volume passing attack there in Baltimore. I am very concerned where most people are drafting Rashad Bateman at pick 54. But from a portfolio standpoint, when we need to grab another wide receiver based on what this format dictates, I think taking Bateman at 61 isn't the worst thing in the world. Okay. Let's move this over. Noah says, are you doing a big dog tonight? I'm sorry, guys. We're probably only doing one draft tonight. I have to go back to a wedding right after we get done with this draft. So sadly, we're not going to get in a $250 draft tonight, but we'll get in one tomorrow. I think that probably we don't have to be adjusting too much to these drafts now that we have the reports that Zach Wilson's going to be good to go. Like, I think Zach Wilson being back in the player pool is going to impact the quarterback value that we should expect on the whole. I don't think you have to push these quarterbacks up knowing that you're not going to have another option later on. But Trey Lance goes 67 here. Guys, y'all know how much I love Lance, but it's wild to see how far the fantasy football community has come now that we are looking at Trey Lance as a quarterback that, of course, has, 2 games starting in his NFL career being drafted before Joe Burrow. I don't want to act like this is the worst thing in the world because, of course, there's a reason that people are doing this. Of course, you have the elite rushing ceiling with Trey Lance. You have the elite situation. We've been talking about it for years now, but it is pretty tough. Like, it's hard for me to come out here and speak on the upside that you have with Trey Lance with as much enthusiasm as we did last year, specifically in Dynasty as well, when he's going at this price point. Like, you're paying a pretty penny for Trey Lance here, but this is where he goes in drafts now. Like, if you want to get Trey Lance in the middle of the 7th, the end of the 7th, if you want to get Lance, like, after Tom Brady, after Dak Prescott, it's never happening for you. Cool coming out says, first draft with the flock. I'm at the 8th spot. Thank you so much for coming to drafting with us, my friend. Let's go through. Let's check out your draft from pick 8. Austin Eckler in the first. Eckler very rarely falls there. I mean, getting him after Derrick Henry is going to be really nice. And then moving on, you have DeAndre Swift making back to in the second. So you're getting 2 running backs here that, of course, both have it in their respective range of outcomes. I don't want to say it's likely, but it's possible that either one of these players ends up leading the NFL in targets at the running back position, which is pretty damn exciting. And then beyond that, you're going to be getting Courtland Sutton at pick 32. Now, personally, I'm not taking Courtland Sutton at pick 32. I would be going on like a little monologue about how bad this pick is and how I'd never do this in a million years before the Tim Patrick injury. After the Tim Patrick injury, now I at least understand it more. I'm still not going to be going out of my way and getting very excited about drafting Courtland Sutton. Like, I would 100% still prefer DJ Moore, but at least I understand why people would do it now that you have no Tim Patrick. And then looking at the 4th, getting Breece Hall at pick 41. I mean, you already have those 2 top-end running backs with a combination of Austin Eckler and DeAndre Swift through the first 2 rounds. But maybe you weren't confident in the running back value making it back on the way. I don't know. Let's see what running backs you're actually able to pull off compared to the receivers in the middle rounds here. I think that's going to come down to what this Breece Hall pick ends up looking like. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Amari Cooper. I think we really have no comments there. All these wide receivers are about in the same tier. Okay. So we have TJ Hawkinson off the board at 80. Probably good for us. I mean, keep in mind, we decided to go ahead and we decided to take Travis Kelce with this build back in the 1st or 2nd round. So if we have Kelce here, probably not dying to go ahead and draft another tight end like TJ Hawkinson, even if I'm fine with the Hawkinson value in general. So let's sit here, think about what we want. I think there are 2 players that I'm going to be fine with at pick 84 and 85. We're probably going to reach on these guys ever so slightly, but in my opinion, it's not going to be the end of the world. I think it'll be completely fine. Is this team on auto? I know it looked like they auto-drafted Josh Allen early on. No, they're not on auto. They go ahead, they take Lazard. We're going to go back-to-back running back here. This is why we decided to go ahead. We decided to take CeeDee Lamb back at the 1-2 turn. So we could just take advantage of this running back value that we're getting later on with the combination of Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Miles Sanders. I mean, we've talked about this in depth. I want to be betting on this Philadelphia Eagles offense. I mean, they have an elite offensive line. If we're looking at Jalen Hurts going into his 2nd year starting, I think that there are reasons to be excited about Philadelphia here. With Miles Sanders, yeah, he was very disappointing last year. Hell, he didn't score a single touchdown. I think that's 100% going to change. So let's go ahead. Let's take Sanders. Let's get Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I'll stand by the fact that I 100% think that CEH is probably a bad running back. I think that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is probably not a talented option. But at the same time, despite everybody loving Isaiah Pacheco, I don't think that there's another running back in Kansas City that you can say is uber talented, that you can say is a clear option to play over Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think he's going to be the favorite to be the 3-down running back in Kansas City. And hell, if he's the 3-down running back in Kansas City, drawing targets out of the backfield, obviously is disappointed over the past 2 years. He was severely injured last year, dealing with a multitude of injuries. And he was disappointing because you drafted him in the 2nd or 3rd round last year. His rookie season, you drafted him in the 1st. So there are real concerns with that light. Okay. So now let's move this over real quick. Adam says, Mason, what are your thoughts from my draft at the 3 spot? Let's go through. Let's check out Adam's draft. Justin Jefferson, Deebo Samuel. We already looked at this earlier. Through the first 3 rounds, I mean, I would say through the first 5 rounds, you had the best team here. I mean, that's just beautiful. Still being able to get an elite level tight end with Darren Waller after filling all 3 starting slots of the wide receiver position. And at the same time, having, in my opinion, someone that has a pretty good shot to be a running back 1 in fantasy this upcoming season with Nick Chubb. I mean, he's been drafted as a running back 1 in fantasy every single year for God knows how long. And then beyond that, you're getting Josh Jacobs at the end of the 6th. This is where Jacobs goes now. I like the value personally. And then if we're going to be looking at DeAndre Hopkins, pick 75. Here with DeAndre Hopkins, I would say if this was a league with the fantasy football playoffs, yes, I like it. I like it if this is a league with fantasy football playoffs where we're prioritized to get points in weeks 15, 16, 17. However, because this is just cumulative scoring, who can score the most points weeks 1 through 17, and it doesn't matter which order they come in that format, it's very hard for me to take a player like that that's going to miss the first weeks of the season, regardless of what you think about them. So I don't love the DeAndre Hopkins selection. And then, MVS 94, James Cook 99. I really do like both of those picks. But overall, I think it's a strong team. The only selection I wouldn't agree with would be the DeAndre Hopkins selection. And that's not even because I have anything against Hopkins. It's just because I think in general, we don't want to be taking a player with that prototype in this format in particular. Russian Collusion says Isaiah Pacheco will be the running back 1 in Kansas City. I would be very surprised if that happens. Very, very, very surprised. It's in the range of outcomes. But for a 7th round rookie running back out of Rutgers that was not hyper efficient in college, for him to end up being that guy, it's not great. I mean, you had 4.5 yards per touch through his 4-year college career at Rutgers. 4.5 yards per. That would be horrible from an NFL perspective. And now he's supposed to be an NFL starting running back. I don't know if we can buy that. But let's go ahead. Let's move this down. I would say Chase Claypool probably not nearly as interesting here with the George Pickens dominance now. So let's go ahead. Let's probably fade Chase Claypool. After that, let's take Zach Ertz as our second tight end here. Now, with Zach Ertz in this selection, we are getting correlation with Kyler Murray in. And at the same time, I think Zach Ertz is more appealing in this format in particular, where we don't have to worry about points in the second half of the season, weeks 15, 16, and 17. Place the priority on those because, like I said, usually you want to be thinking about the fantasy football playoff stretch. Here it's cumulative scoring. So if Zach Ertz is going to have that great start to the year before DeAndre Hopkins comes back in, let's go ahead. Let's take Zach Ertz 108. And then a player that I'm drafting over and over and over again. We've already talked about this at length. Tyler Boyd. I feel like Tyler Boyd, because the concentration of targets in Cincinnati, what we have seen over the past 2 years, is being drafted a little closer to his actual floor than his ceiling or even a median projection. So if you're taking Tyler Boyd, I don't necessarily see how that pick ends up being a massive bust. I don't see how Tyler Boyd ends up being a massive bust and you go, okay, Mason, you clown. You clearly needed Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore was the league winner. Tyler Boyd gave you absolutely... I don't necessarily see any wide receivers in this range going out and just torching us. But at the same time, with Tyler Boyd, if something were to occur where maybe we were to see an injury with Jamar Chase, with T. Higgins, then all of a sudden you could have Tyler Boyd immediately stepping into being a top 24 wide receiver in Cincinnati. So I like the idea of going through, taking Tyler Boyd in as many of these spots as I can, especially in this format where you can just cycle through that flex spot. Russian Collusion says Clyde Edwards-Helaire has a 4.4 yards per carry. My friend, there's a massive difference between yards per carry and yards per touch. Let me look up Clyde Edwards-Helaire's yards per touch in the NFL. And I'm not saying this is hyper predictive at all. Like, your analysis shouldn't center around yards per touch. I'm just saying when it's a crazy end of the spectrum, like you have a bottom 5th percentile outcome, a bottom 5th percentile performance from Isaiah Pacheco at Rutgers, I don't necessarily see how that translates to NFL production. And if you want to play this game, if you want to look at these guys, hell, you've had 17 for 6 yards from scrimmage for Clyde Edwards-Helaire and 355 career touches. See, it's just been about 5 yards per touch, an entire yards per touch more than Isaiah Pacheco, who played at Rutgers, compared to Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the NFL, 21 and 22 years old. Wyatt says, what do you think of Brian Robinson Jr. on the Commanders? I think that this is a running back that does have the frame where he can handle all 3 downs. I think that's a very big check mark that you're wanting to see. He's not a great pass catching running back, but he's capable. He's not an elite level athlete. I think he's just a guy, but I think he can handle a first and second down workload if the Commanders were to want to go away from Antonio Gibson. And if you pull up our draft guide, one of the reasons maybe you didn't want to draft Antonio Gibson was because the fumbling issue. I'm more concerned with Antonio Gibson fumbling than any other running back in the NFL, and it's not even remotely close. Because if we were going to go through and say, oh yeah, no, fumbles aren't necessarily random, they're predictive, which I think usually it's a small sample occurrence. Usually it's more random than anything. But if it wasn't going to be random and it was going to be an issue, it probably would be an issue for the guy who's not used to seeing touches every single down. It's probably not usual for a wide receiver to go through and see 300 touches up the middle between the tackles during an NFL regular season. So if I was going to believe anybody had a fumbling issue and that player ended up having to get benched, it probably would be the wide receiver convert to the running back position. So the fact that Antonio Gibson fumbled today, he's like the one player that I'm actually worried about that happening with. But Matt Ryan goes off the board, 127. Dear God, we got a Matt Ryan fan out here. Oh, dear God, I can't get behind that Matt Ryan selection. We have about 4 names that I'd be excited about getting. Of course, I can't take a tight end. I mean, everybody drafting with us knows that I can't take a tight end here. Alexander Mattison off the board. Alexander Mattison would have been one of those players we were looking at grabbing at the end of the 11th, the beginning of the 12th, given what you would see if Dalvin Cook missed any time. But Michael Gallup goes, and I was about to say that usually he's my favorite target in this range. But because it's cumulative scoring, we don't have a fantasy football playoffs. Those guys that are going to miss the beginning portion of the season, we do have to knock ever so slightly. So here, I guess we just go ahead. We just grab 2 more wide receivers that are going to be able to draw targets. I mean, in the case of Joshua Palmer, this is a wide receiver that may not necessarily be a great talent, but at the end of the day, he will be in a great situation where he'll be close to being an every down player for one of the most productive offenses in the NFL in Los Angeles with Justin Herbert. So I think we go ahead. We take Joshua Palmer for the upside with the situation. And if something were to change, maybe it's a very similar situation to Tyler Boyd, where we're drafting him close to his median projection or close to his floor. And there's, of course, the contingency value of what would happen if you end up getting an injury to Mike Williams or an injury to Keenan Allen. And then all of a sudden, Joshua Palmer is seeing an 18-19% team target share from Justin Herbert, one of the best players in football. I think that would be very exciting. But George Pickens goes 136. Let me know what y'all think of this. Obviously, the 2 highest risers, George Pickens and Romeo Doubs, going 136, 137 here. Is this too early, too late? Let me know what y'all think of the live chat. And also, while you're down there, please drop a like on the live stream. If you haven't dropped a like on the live stream yet, fix your life. Let's get this live stream at least over 250 likes. What are we doing here, guys? I know there's a game going on today, but still, what are we doing here, my friends? Now, Pat Freiermuth goes 139. Usually, I love the value of Pat Freiermuth in this range. Like, all these tight ends are about the same, but like, even if we're looking at where we took Zach Ertz at 108, like, I think it's easily in the range of outcomes. It's 100% possible for Pat Freiermuth to outscore Zach Ertz. Like, we only took Zach Ertz here because we had to go ahead and conform to that roster construction where we had Kyler Murray, and at the same time, we are looking at a league where we need to be front-running our production probably at the beginning of the season rather than looking for the fantasy football playoffs. But in a regular fantasy football format, if I don't have Kyler Murray, like, why the hell would you ever go ahead and draft Zach Ertz where we did when you can get Pat Freiermuth this late? A great pick on Pat Freiermuth. Okay. Albert O off the board. We want to see these tight ends off. I mean, we have Kelsey and Ertz. Of course, we're done at tight end. Dylan says, Chargers are big fans of Joshua Palmer. Just have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams before him. Okay, I'm assuming that's the situation, my friend. I don't exactly know what you're saying there. Joseph saying Pickens cooking the Seahawks. Okay, has George Pickens made another play? Let me go through and pull this up. Okay, so Gesicki, Hunter Henry go here. I like the value of both these guys as well. The issue is, I mean, even if they would have fallen to us at 156, we couldn't have taken them. Very rarely are they ever going to fall there. I mean, you shouldn't expect that at all. DJ Chark off the board. Chark is interesting in this format because obviously you're going to have Jameson Williams out the beginning portion of the season. Okay, so what's interesting is I just pulled up the box score here from the Seattle Seahawks and Pittsburgh Steelers game. You only have 10 attempts from Geno Smith, and that's it. And the game's about to be through halftime. Very, very interesting. Maybe are they playing Geno Smith an entire half, and then they're going to play Drew Lock an entire half? Just looking at what we had. No, George Pickens, another reception. George Pickens, 3 receptions, 43 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown. And obviously, was just a highlight catch there. Okay. So KJ Hamler, KJ Osborne, both off the board. I probably prefer the KJ playing with Russell Wilson rather than Kirk Cousins. A great pick there. Now, if we're picking at 156, I think we only take one more wide receiver with this team. Let's see exactly who that wide receiver is going to be. We probably want to work our way up to 6 running backs with this build. So let's take the combination of Jarvis. Let's take the New Orleans Saints, guys. Let's go Jarvis, Landry, and let's take Jameis Winston here. I think with this format, we don't necessarily need to continue to hammer in this wide receiver depth at the very end of this roster. I think what we can prioritize on is just getting enough players across every position to make sure that we're not going to miss out on any production during this season. So let's go ahead. Let's get these guys. And we're probably going to take a third quarterback here as well, even though I know the majority of people wouldn't do that. I know the majority of people would take the combination of Kyler and Jameis Winston and be completely done. And of course, if this wasn't a best ball format, and not only a best ball format, but a private draft, if it wasn't this exact situation, I probably would stop here. I mean, if it was just a regular casual redraft league, I would have only taken Kyler, and I would, of course, never taken Jameis Winston here. I'd be taking shots on late round running backs. But at this point, I think it does make sense to just go ahead, lock in this production. Swizz World says, Shakir blew up today. Okay, let me go through. Of course, we are box score scouting right now. I've been at a wedding all day. I'm going to go to a wedding, back to the wedding right after this draft. But I will go through and look into exactly what happened tomorrow. But for the time being, let's just at least pull up what happened with Shakir. Because I would have a lot of burnt teams that have the combination of, one of Isaiah McKenzie or Jamison Crowder if Khalil Shakir ended up going out there and actually winning the slot wide receiver job for the Buffalo Bills. Shakir, 5 receptions, 92 receiving yards. Let me look it up on Twitter, see if he made any highlight plays that we could see or what people are talking about in general. Okay, so he was playing on the first half. Yeah, so this catch he made was at the very end of the second quarter. He's playing into the second half as well. This catch that he just made, it looked like a very standard catch. It's so funny. An account built in Buffalo, so obviously a Buffalo fan page, tweets out an ordinary catch from Khalil Shakir and goes, Shakir is special. Okay, let's move this over. Noah Fant off the board here, 169. I like Noah Fant. I like the value of it. But like I said, we can't take another tight end here, so it doesn't even freaking matter if Noah Fant would have fallen to us a big 180. So selfishly, probably a great thing that Noah Fant goes off the board. Clint says Josh Allen or Justin Herbert. I think if you're talking from a passing yards perspective, I wouldn't be surprised if Justin Herbert had more passing yards than Josh Allen. But from a fantasy football perspective, given the rushing upside that you're going to have from a Josh Allen and the rushing touchdowns in particular, you're going to have to go through. You are 100% going to end up having to take Allen. Like, you're not going to ever get Justin Herbert to 500 rushing yards and potentially 8 rushing touchdowns in a season. And we know that Josh Allen and Justin Herbert are going to be in the same tier, at least, when it comes to, oh, dear God, Jameson Williams still on the board when it comes to their passing volume. But Paris Campbell off the board, 174 here. Jameson Williams finally goes off 175. Williams is going to fall further in these drafts, given the fact that this is a wide receiver that will miss the beginning portion of the season, and you really can't afford to have that happen in a league that doesn't have the fantasy football playoffs. Marlon Mack, 176. Isaiah Pacheco, what was the report? Gets 3 touches. Let's read this. Pacheco carried the ball twice for 6 yards while adding 1 catch for 5 yards in Saturday's preseason loss to Chicago. Pacheco seems to be buried on the Chiefs running back depth chart, but 2 of his 3 touches came during the first series of the game during Patrick Mahomes' lone drive. Actually, that's very interesting. Very interesting that he saw touches with Patrick Mahomes on the field. I did not expect that at all. But now, what was the report on Mostert? Unlikely to suit up. Okay, so it sounds like that's probably a pretty good sign for Mostert. If he's not going to be playing this upcoming week, they're not necessarily talking about an injury. It's just he's starting. I mean, he's sitting with the starters. I've never liked Raheem Mostert. I've known that. I mean, we've talked down on him for God knows how long. But let's take him here. And is Brian Robinson's, of course, already off the board. But let's go with another running back. Let's take J.D. McKissic here. I think we just need to hammer in some of these running backs. We need to get guaranteed touches at the single position. But let me show off this entire draft board. We are about 16 rounds deep. And what I'm probably going to have to do, I know I'm very sorry for doing this, guys. I'm supposed to be at a wedding right now. I wanted to get y'all this live stream tonight. But I'm probably going to have to leave at this point. I don't know if we're going to be able to stick around for the last two picks. We told people we'd be back way earlier than we actually are. So thank you for coming out, hanging out with me tonight. I promise you, tomorrow night we'll be getting a much longer draft going, but I wanted to get an update for y'all. I wanted to talk a little George Pickens. I wanted to get your opinion on Antonio Gibson. But thank you guys. I appreciate you all. I hope you have a great night. I hope we get to see you with the live stream tomorrow. And of course, if you want to get in our next draft with us, make sure you go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code FLOCK when you sign up. You'll get our 2022 fantasy football rankings, our 2022 fantasy football draft guide, and a dollar for dollar deposit match up to 100. But thank you guys. I appreciate y'all. And I will see y'all.